Hey besties, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another one of my videos. Today we are doing a bit of a different video. Usually about right now I'd be doing a TBR video for the month. However, since we are starting the new year, I thought I'd do 25 books I want to read in 2025 instead. So more like a yearly TBR of 25 books. I did a 24 books I wanted to read in 2024 last year, and I think I read about half of them. So that was pretty good, especially since my reading taste kind of changed throughout the year. I know I still want to read some of those books, but they're not as high on my radar anymore. So those will probably just be picked up whenever I feel like it, sort of thing, or if I'm in the mood for something like that. But I have 25 books to go through. So I will say out of these 25 books, I would say 2/3 of them are fantasy books because it's winter, it's December. That's primarily where my mindset is, and what's on my radar is primarily fantasy. So that's primarily what this video is going to be. But I have broken them up into genres, so we can talk about each genre. So I'm going to start with the romance genre. I have a few romance books on my list that I want to read this year, and none of these books came out, well, none of these books really came out recently, or I don't even think any of them came out this year, if I'm being honest. Maybe one of them did, but I only have a few of them, so let's get into it. So first up, I have King of Wrath by Anna Huang. Um, this is part of her Kings of Sin series that's currently incomplete. Book 4 has been released. She's currently working on book 5, King of Envy, I believe. But I've heard pretty good things about this series by her in particular. I actually have quite a few of her other books, but I've been really interested in reading this series in particular. And so this is one I really want to get to this year. This one in particular is about a CEO billionaire named Dante and Vivian, who is a jewelry heiress and daughter to Dante's enemy. So it's just a CEO billionaire romance. I used to love these kinds of stories, so I'm really intrigued to read this and see what I think of it now. Hopefully I'll be getting to this one. I might be getting to this one soon, honestly. I've actually picked this one up before and read a few pages and was enjoying it, but then I wanted to read something else, so I didn't end up continuing this. Maybe I'll see if it's on Kindle Unlimited, because if it is, I might be more inclined to read this. But yeah, that's on my list. Okay, next up is actually, it's a classic, but it is a romance story, and that is Pride and Prejudice. This and Little Woman are the two classics I find most interesting, and I actually really like the story of Pride and Prejudice, so I'm really interested to see if I'll actually like the book, because I've seen multiple adaptations of it, but I really want to read this in 2025, and I'm hoping I do get to it. My goal this year was to actually read a classic, and I didn't, and I'm really interested in reading this one in particular, so hopefully I'll get to this one in 2025. But yeah, that's on my list as well. Next up, I actually have quite a popular YA romance. People seem to really love this story, and so I am really intrigued in reading it. And I really do want to read it and get into this author's works and stuff to see if it is my taste or not. And that is The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. People really love this book and really love Lynn Painter's YA works. So I'm really intrigued to read this and see if it's my taste, if I like it or not. And I really wanted to read it this year, I just never got around to it. So hopefully in 2025, I will be getting into this. Okay, my final romance that's on my 25 and 2025 is the Kingmakers series by Sophie Lark. This in particular, year one, because I want to start the series. I don't know if the books are like being published for the first time or if they're being republished with new covers, but this one came out like a few months ago, and I've been really intrigued to read it and stuff. if I'm correct, this is like a spin-off series to the Brutal Birthright series, and this follows the kids attending a mafia university, I think. But it's a romance series, and I believe there's 5 books, and I think each one follows like a different year. This is year 1, and then so on and so forth. So I'm really intrigued to read this, also to see if I like Sophie Lark's writing, because I'm not 100% sure if I do. But yeah, I'm intrigued to read this. I'm intrigued by the Mafia University aspect of the story, and I hope to read it in 2025. Okay, so next up, I'm going to talk about the one mystery thriller I've put on my list. I don't read too many mystery thrillers. I read them every now and again. I think the last one I read was at the beginning of November, but I've added to this list One of Us is Dead by Geneva Rose. I read Home is Where the Bodies Are by her and actually really enjoyed it and really liked the plot twist and was really enjoying her writing and her storytelling. And I actually had this one prior, and now that I've read one of her books, I'm actually really intrigued to pick this one up and see if I like this one. I know she also has The Perfect Marriage, but I want to go ahead and read this one because I really enjoyed Home is Where the Bodies Are, so I'm hoping I enjoy this one too. Okay, next up, I actually have 2 like literary fiction books. One of the books is actually it has a bit of a, I guess you could say, fantasy element, and that is Lovely War by Julie Berry. If you don't know, this is like a historical fiction that takes place during World Wars One and Two. But what's unique about this is it's told from the viewpoints of the Greek gods. So that's where the fantasy element comes in. But I've heard nothing but wonderful things about this book, and I do really enjoy Greek mythology, and I'm really intrigued to read this because I think I'd enjoy this type of book, especially with the historical fiction and the Greek mythology. So I'm really excited to read this, and I really want to get to this in 2025. So also, sorry if my voice is like starting to go. The weather's just like taking me out right now. Okay, so the other fiction novel I have is also an historical fiction, and that is The Woman by Kristen Hanna. I've heard nothing but amazing things about Kristen Hanna's writing and her work and the amount of effort she puts into her historical fictions. And I've heard people really, really enjoy this one, so I'm really looking forward to reading this one, and I really hope to read it in this year. Hopefully, I can read it in the next few months because I really want to read one of her books and have my heart ripped out essentially. Okay, so the rest of the books I have are all fantasy for my 25 and 2025, and we're actually going to be starting off with one that I do not own because it hasn't been released yet. It's a highly anticipated read of mine, and that is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This is the 3rd book in the Empyrean, and I absolutely loved the first and second book. I know a lot of people were disappointed with the second book, but I absolutely loved that book. And so I'm really, really excited to see how she continues the story. I can't wait to see what happens in that book because if you've read them, you know a lot has happened in that series. I'm really excited to see where we venture next, especially with how book 2 ended. Those of you who know, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I'm really excited. And honestly, I'll probably be reading that like right when I get it in January. So that's why it's on my list, because it comes out in January. Okay, so next up, I actually have the second book in the Emily Wilde series. This is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. I'm not exactly sure what she does in this one, but if you don't know, this is a cozy fantasy. Although I will say the first book kind of surprised me and became a little high stakes at point. Like, people were almost dying. Our girl Emily almost bled out. Like, it got actually pretty intense. So it's cozy fantasy for like most of it. And I'm hoping this one has a bit of like that element too. Keep you on your toes, keep you in suspense. But I am very intrigued to read this one. And I know a third one's coming out. I think it's coming out at the beginning of 2025. I'm not exactly sure when, but I do know it is. So yeah, I hope to read this one soon and maybe in preparation for that third one coming out. Okay, so next up, I actually have Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. This is the first book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, like kind of an introduction for her whole Grisha verse. I think that's what it's called. In this, you're following Alina, who's a soldier, and she's orphaned, and I know she has some serious power. But honestly, what made me intrigued to read this was the trailer for the Netflix show. I know people were kind of disappointed because it's not exactly following like what the books have and stuff, and brings in elements from the Six of Crows duology and things. But I'm still really intrigued to read it and see if I like it, and then also read the Six of Crows duology because I know people absolutely love that duology, even if they're not a big fan of this trilogy. So, but I will be reading this first because I've heard that you can read the Six of Crows duology before this. However, it does maybe make it a little more difficult trying to get into that because Leigh Bardugo kind of skips some of the world building that's included in this. So I'll be reading this first, hopefully earlier on in 2025. So next up is a YA fantasy that came out not too long ago, and that is The Dagger and the Flame. Um, it's about two rival gang members that are pitted against each other. And I guess they fall in love. It's a romantasy. I don't really know too much about it. This is one of those books that I've seen a lot of people talk about, like reading the book, but no one's talked about like what they actually thought of the book, if that makes sense. Like I've seen people read it but not review it. And so I don't really know people's genuine feelings towards this book. But to me, it sounds really good and I'm very intrigued to read it. So hopefully I'll be reading this year. Next up, I have actually like I would say it's a well-recognized indie series, and that is The Ever King by L.J. Andrews. To my knowledge, this is like a pirate romantasy, but with a morally gray male main character who is the like I'll do anything for the female main character kind of guy. My best friend read this. She absolutely loved this. She actually read it over the summer. I'm really intrigued to read this, see what I think of it. I've seen a lot of stuff on my like social media that's like promo content that's really making me intrigued by this book, and I really want to read it. So hopefully I'll be reading this soon. I believe it's still an incomplete series. I think there's one more book coming out, but there's currently 3 books out, so hopefully I can read this soon. So next up I actually have it's a pretty recent release. It's called Bloodguard by CC Robson. Look at those sprayed edges. I love a good sprayed edge. But I know this is a romantasy and it's kind of a gladiator romantasy, I guess you could say. I don't know too much about the actual plot of it, but I've been really intrigued by this and the not the plot. I literally said I don't know much of the plot of it. But I've really been intrigued by this book and really curious because I haven't really seen many people talk about this or anything. So I'm curious to see what I think of it, if I like it. I know it's the first book in a series, so see if I'll be continuing the series whenever the next ones come out. So next up, I actually have the first book in a series I kind of mentioned in, or will be mentioning in my bookish video for the month. I don't know if it's out by this time or if this one's going out first, but that is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, right? Yes. This is the first book in the All Souls series. I believe there's 5 books currently out. This was actually made into a TV show. I don't know what it's on, but I've heard it's pretty good, and so I really want to read the books before I watch that so I don't get anything spoiled from me and I can do a little comparison. But I'm really intrigued to see what I think of this and if I like it. And as you will see in that video or have seen, I got books 2, 3, and 4 from my aunt, so I'm like all set to really read this series. So hopefully I will be reading it very soon. So next up we have the first book in a duology that I've heard really good things about. People really like it. People tend to like the second one better, but still really like the first one as well. And that is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I know this is a gothic romantasy. My best friend actually just finished the second one and she absolutely loved them. And so I'm really intrigued to read this and see what I think of them and if I like them. I know Rachel Gillig has a new book coming out in May, I believe. So maybe if I read this by then, I will get her new book and read that. If I like this, if I like her writing, only if I like her writing. This really doesn't help my book buying problem, but you know, it's okay. It's okay. But yeah, I'm really excited to read this in 2025. So next up, we have Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco. I actually have this book, Throne of the Fallen, and the second book, Throne of Secrets, and I have read her Kingdom of the Wicked trilogy, and I actually quite enjoyed it. It's a bit of a darker romantasy, but I definitely like that style. Like, I've really been in the mood for those kinds of books. Like, I've recently read Phantasma and a bunch of the Zodiac Academy books, and I've just really been in the type of mood for these type of books. So I'm hoping I read this soon. I've heard pretty good things about it and people quite like it, especially if you like the Kingdom of the Wicked trilogy. So I'm excited to read this and continue my Carrie Maniscalco journey. So next up we have a book that I've actually shown in a haul and I'm quite excited to read. I've been waiting to read it and I actually have the first two books. I really want to read it soon because I've heard nothing but good things about it, and that is Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This is the first book in the Kindred's Curse saga. Remember when I had trouble saying that? Kindred's Curse. I got it now. But this is the first book. I'll be honest, I actually don't know too much about this series. I've just heard that if you like a bunch of other books that I've liked, you'll like this book, and people have like nothing but good things to say about it. It's a slow burn romantasy. I'm really excited to read it. I mean, the first book's really not that long, so I'm hoping to get to this and maybe the rest of the series by the end of the year. By the end of 2025, not 2024. 2025. But yeah, very excited. So the next book is actually another indie book, another indie edition. It's recently gotten a little bit of hype, people really liking it because the author came out with another book, but that is Nocticadia by Carrie Lake. This is a hardcover indie edition of this book, which is super exciting. I actually was at Barnes and Noble and they had a pile of these and I was like, oh my god, I like freaked out, jaw dropped on the floor, was like, I need to get it. So I got it. But this is it's a dark academia, but also, according to Goodreads, it's also a fantasy, well, a romantasy. But I've heard people really, really liking the romance in this and really liking Deverick, our male main character. So I'm really, really, really excited to read this, and hopefully I'll be reading this soon because I think it really fits the vibe right now. So next up, we actually have another indie book, which actually I think has recently got traditionally published, which is very exciting, and that is Quicksilver by Callie Hart. This is the first book in the Fate and Alchemy series, and I know the second book has been announced to come out in fall 2025, so I definitely want to read this sooner rather than later to where I'm prepared for when that comes out. But I've heard people really, really like this story. They really like the romance. They really like both the characters, the plot, everything about this. I don't know too much about it, I'm going to be honest. If people tell me it's a really good book and I have multiple people telling me that, then I'm just going to buy it without really knowing what it's about, which is a bit of a problem. It's kind of my toxic trait, one of my toxic traits, but I'm really excited to read this and hopefully I'll be reading it very soon to where I'm prepared for the second book. So next up, we actually have the second book in a series. and that is Bloodmarked by Tracy Dion. This is the second book to Legendborn in the series is called the Legendborn cycle. And I know the third book, Oathbound, comes out in March, I believe. If you don't know, this is it's an urban romantasy. It's an urban fantasy though, YA, and it's based around King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. I read the first book and absolutely loved it. I thought it was a 5 stars. I thought it was an amazing book, an amazing story, and it left like on this massive reveal. And I don't know why I haven't picked up the second book yet. I really need to, especially since the third one comes out in March. But I hope I will be getting to this one very soon. My best friend, she read this second one as well, and she was like, oh my god, it was amazing. So I really need to get to this one and read it soon. So this is a lot of books. It's a lot of books, guys. My voice is like really going. I'm so sorry. Next up, we actually have another second book, and the second book in a duology. So once I read this, I'm done with it. And that is Vow of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. This is the second book to the Dance of Thieves duology. And I don't know why, honestly, I haven't picked this up and read it. I've just been reading a bunch of other stuff. But I really enjoyed the first one, and it left on, if I remember correctly, left on a cliffhanger, like a massive one. And I really enjoyed that. I think I might have given it 5 stars. I think I gave it 5 stars. So I don't know why I haven't picked up this one. I've heard basically everyone say that the second one's better than the first one. So I really need to get into this and read it and just actually go for it. And so I'm really excited to do that. And hopefully I'll be doing that sooner than later. So we're so close. We only have 4 more books. Yes, 4 more books. I was like, did I count correctly? So next up we have, it's technically classified as a fantasy, but I know some people just consider it a fiction novel. And that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This is actually the special edition, which I found at a bookstore in Maine, which I was very, very excited about. I absolutely love the blue cover. I've heard people like rave about this book and absolutely love it, especially like Sarah Crowley and Destiny Sidwell. They talked about this book and how much they loved it, so it made me really want to read this book. So I definitely got it and I'm very excited to read this. Finally, I really want to read this. I've had this since like the summer, so I really want to read this soon. So next up we have The Curse of Saints by Kate Dramas. This is the first book in the Curse of Saints not trilogy, series. I don't know how many books are going to be in this, but this is about a girl named Aya. I think her name's Aya, but she's an elite spy and the queen's third in command, and she has a rivalry with Will, who's the enforcer, and they have to fight alongside one another. And there's a lot, I think, that goes down in this book. This is a romantasy. I think Aya is maybe more important than she thinks she is. I'm not 100% sure, but it sounded really good. I'm really, really intrigued to read this. It sounds really intriguing and stuff and interesting, and yeah, that's it. Yeah, I got nothing else. Okay, moving on. Next up, we have House of Beating Wings by Olivia Wildenstein. I couldn't remember the name of this book in my bookish video, so I definitely said the wrong name in that video. But this is the first book, and I think it's the Kingdom of Crows series. I don't know too much about this, I'm going to be honest, but I thought it was really pretty, and I like the sprayed edges. And the first part of the blurb on the back literally says, "Free the crows, Fallon, and they will make you queen." Like, if that's not good enough, I don't know what is. That's good enough for me. I think it's a romantasy, so that's exciting. Oh, I think it's a romantasy between Fallon and the prince, which is very exciting. Look at that. I'm learning stuff with you guys. But yeah, I'm excited to start this series, and maybe I'll also be reading the second one because I have that as well, which you will see in my bookish video, but very excited. And finally, probably the book that I won't say most excited to read, but very, very excited to read and really need to read, and have been needing to read for a long time. Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. Okay, I read the first all the way through Air of Fire in like July and August, and then got this and didn't read it. And I think it's because I just need a little bit of break from Throne of Glass. But I really, really, really want to read this because I want to finish the series. So I have 4 books left, all very chunky books, and I will be doing the tandem read. But I really just really, really, really need to read this. If you don't know what the Throne of Glass series is about, you're following Selena Sardothien, and she is 16 years old, and she is the best assassin in the world. That's all I'm going to say. That's all you really need to know going into the book series. Earlier this year, I read Sarah J. Maas's entire ACOTAR series, absolutely loved it. And then I read the first 4 books of this series, and I don't know why I haven't read any since because I really enjoy Sarah J. Maas's writing, and I really just need to read this. So that's on the 25 and 2025 list, concluding the list actually. So putting this in the pile. Well, guys, that is all the books that are on my essentially my yearly TBR for 2025, the 25 books I want to read in 2025. I'm glad I made it through while you could still understand me, but I will be ending the video here. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video and this type of video. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. You can leave a comment down below if any of these books are on your radar, if you've read some of these books and what you thought of them, if you like this type of video. If you have any books that are on your list of books you want to read in the new year, make sure to subscribe to my channel to keep up with all my videos and all my YouTube content. And I will see you guys when I see you. Bye, guys.